Today, very special episode of Coffee and Chel. Myself and Tyler, joined by NHL Insider Chris Johnston from TSN and host of the Chris Johnston Show. Thank you for taking the time to talk hockey today.
It's a great thing to be here, right? First day of school for those still going to school. And for me, it feels a little bit like back to work. I got to be honest. Always, right when you get to this side of Labor Day, it starts to get real again that we're going to have a season, we're going to have training camps, and obviously a lot of storylines and news to follow as well.
It's funny that always seems to be like the day, like right after Labor Day, you see like the kids going back to school. And it's like that means hockey time is about to ramp up. So, always kind of signifies the start of the season. So, we love to talk about your career being an NHL insider. So, Stewie, why don't you take it away and let's learn a little bit.
Yeah, obviously, me and you are buddies, and we go back a few years now, and we obviously I shoot you a lot of texts, just trying to get the scoops. But I always wonder, like, so when you were coming up, like when you were a kid, did you like play hockey, like, or were you just always just like a big hockey fan? Like how did that all start? Like your love for hockey, I guess.
Yeah, I was hockey obsessed as a kid. And I'm older than you two, so I essentially grew up in an era kind of before the internet, and so the reason I say that being relevant is I was basically in the street all the time as a kid playing hockey, road hockey with my buddies. We put rollerblades on. I played organized hockey in the little town where I grew up, and I couldn't always stay up late enough, at least in my early days, to watch NHL games. But I became quickly obsessed with the NHL. I collected trading cards as a kid. I was one of those kids that memorized all the stats for some reason. I remember being out with like my dad and his buddies, and I was almost like a parlor trick for them. How many goals did Cam Neely score last year or whatever? And I just, for some reason at that time, all that stuck with me. So, I probably didn't know what an NHL insider was until I was 20 years old. I don't know, but I wasn't necessarily planning to do this exact career, but certainly from a very young age, hockey was all that I thought about. It was my passion, and I from really young, I actually wanted to be a hockey journalist, a writer. We had the newspaper at my kitchen table, all these things. If we have a young audience here, like, what the hell is a newspaper? But we used to have a physical thing that when I ate my breakfast in the morning, I'd look at the standings and read the stories, and I thought that would be a cool job, and I chased it and chased it and chased it, and somehow it became reality.
Let me ask you this. So if someone's trying, like, because it's such a crazy job, and there's so few NHL insiders, it's very difficult to become an insider of any sport, really, simply because of the nature of the game. But if you were to like go back and you had to tell someone, but these are the steps that'll give you the best shot, like, is it just all about networking? Is it all about like just building up a Rolodex, like getting sources? Like how would you go about that if you were to start all over again?
I mean, I wish there was like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 list to follow. I think, I imagine if like we went through Elliot Friedman's career, or Pierre LeBrun, or Darren Dreger, or anyone else, Emily Kaplan, Frank Saravalli, like everyone's probably found it their own way. But certainly networking is it's where it all starts, right? And I would say if I was giving advice to younger me, it would be a little bit more patient, which is really hard to do when you're young in an industry, when you're trying to prove yourself. Like I remember all that time really well, and it felt like it was never going to come. But when I look back now, without naming any names, like it's crazy how many people, whether they're influential agents or people that have pretty high profile jobs in front offices, that I met when I was young, and they were kind of young, like the same-ish age, say, and sometimes having a few of those connections is important. But, I'm not just getting information from people my own age. I mean, there's still much older agents or general managers that you have to communicate with, sometimes much younger players nowadays, too, because I'm younger than the guys in the league themselves. And so, I think it does start with your network, and there's probably lots of different ways to do it. I'm actually a bit shy, if I'm being honest, sometimes. I certainly was when I was younger. You kind of get over that as you progress through life a little bit, but it didn't maybe come always to me naturally. I think when I know you, I'm comfortable opening up, but sometimes, I maybe wasn't as upfront as I should have been in, say, getting a number or initiating those relationships. But I think that's a big one. And then you have to somehow keep a job, right? I mean, some of it is just like durability. Can you hang around long enough? Because it's. I don't mean to make light of that, because so many of my colleagues over the years, unfortunately, have had to deal with job losses. But the media industry is quite turbulent. And, some product of it is just stamina. And if you can, stay in the game long enough to have your connections, bear fruit. And then, I think everyone has their own style, but you also can't really be a jerk. I think ultimately, you try to be as fair to people as you can. If you have an explosive story, generally you're trying to, let someone know if it's going to really impact them. That's not always possible. Like every situation is maybe a little bit unique, but, I think you try to I grew up in a small town. It's sort of, you're kind of aware of hockey's a small town at the end of the day. We're stretched out across the world, even in just the NHL specifically, we're stretched out across North America, but I think anyone who's been around the industry for long enough, we all kind of seem to know each other a little bit, and that pays off too when it comes to getting information.
I always wondered, and this might be a dumb question, but I always wondered the differences. Like I always feel like it's like a race on who can break something first between all you guys, or like who's trying to. Was there ever a point like, and I don't think it is now. I asked Elliot this when I was a national too, and he's like, no, that's never true. But was there ever a point where it's like, if you broke a story first, you got like you don't have to tell me like money wise, but like, did you get like a bonus, or was there any kind of like
accolades?
Yeah, like accolades.
Yeah, like how does that work?
Like,
yeah.
Oh, you're first. You know what I mean? But was there anything ever, monetary, where they're like, were made, like you chase the carrot almost more? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, nothing that I've ever experienced or that I've even heard of from anyone else, specifically financial. I think though, when you look at if you're the first on news, or if you're consistently right about things, that's how you build a social media following, and
right.
That's part of this too, and obviously that's evolving and changing. I don't know if we're all going to be living on X for a long time, or I don't know how these things are going to go. I don't even say that politically or anything. I'm not sure. It seems like there's all these competing social networks, but I think that certainly in Twitter's early days, for those of us that were there right from the start, and I was pretty close to the start, that there was a chance if you were the first on news, or you proved to be reliable with information, that was one way to get more followers than maybe some other people. And in a roundabout way, I think the number of followers probably doesn't exactly equal your paycheck, but it does. It affords you opportunities, right? Because we're really measuring reach with something like that. And so that's probably the closest I could say to it. But it's never been like in any of my contracts.
Yeah.
If you break this signing or this many signings, you get a bonus. Honestly, it's kind of evolved over the years too, because news moves so quickly now. Right. Don't get me wrong. Every day of the week, if you ask me, I would love to be first on the big story of the day. I'm not diminishing that sort of competitive juice is there, but I do think over time it's become a little less important, because sometimes it's about who understands why things happen. Sometimes it's what about the situation, not just getting the actual first one to put it out. So it definitely matters, and I do think it helps you get a following. There's a reason why Elliot has whatever many hundreds of thousands of followers he has. But as far as I know, I don't think anyone's ever gotten that specific of a bonus. It's not like your rookie contract that you get.
I just thought it was. I don't know. I just thought it was like, because I was like, man, so it seems so like competitive, and I know like you've been doing it forever, so it's like maybe like some of like the small, and I won't name names obviously, but like some of the smaller guys, it's like you said. I've seen a few times where they're trading guys that aren't even traded, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, like you know what I mean, and the poor guy's probably like answering 50,000 text messages, and they're like, oh, I didn't get traded.
Do you think that just in you mentioned that you've been wanting to do this since you were a kid, and like I remember back like just turning on like Sports Center, and like that's how you get the news, and now because like we're in the information era where it's just like everything is instant, it means, I think it alludes a little bit to what you were saying, where the insider being a little bit more open to, or being able to deliver context and like what this means and things like that. Do you think that it matters less about, because the second someone tweets it, right, everyone knows, because then everyone else is just like, per whatever, here is, what's happening. Whereas, 15 years ago, it was whatever network. Like, do you think it mattered more being first then than it does now? In terms of like being the absolute first to break a trade or a signing?
100%. If we go back 20 years ago, you might have seen, again, when that newspaper got delivered to someone's door, one paper in a town might have had a story on their team that the other papers didn't have. And the other papers had to wait a day, essentially, to sort of like follow up or match it. Then it moves to the network thing you're talking about, maybe more 15 years ago. In Canada specifically, I can speak to you at Sportsnet and TSN that were competing. And you might get a 20-minute head start because they might not have a program on live. And honestly, now it's seconds. That's the thing. as I say, I'm not saying this to say I've given up. I don't want.
Oh, no,
If I could choose, I would want to be first every single time. Like I have to be clear with that. But I do think it is a little less important because there's other aspects to things. It's really important. I think on a day like trade deadline day still, or because there's so much focus in that window, and everyone's talking to each other, and it's just chaos. The beautiful kind of chaos, but it's chaos. But I just think, generally speaking, it's probably not as important, but it still matters. And I think if you're in that, I could tell you, there's nothing worse than the feeling when you know something, but maybe you need one final sort of, yes, you're right, just because, and you're just refreshing your phone because like I'm never sort of arrogant enough to think if I know it, no one else would know it. Do you know what I mean? Like usually if I'm onto something, I assume that there's like 4 or 5 other people out there doing the same thing, and you just refresh your phone, and it has happened so many times. At like 7 p.m., I'm in my living room, and whoever gets it first, Pierre, whatever, someone puts it out, and you're like, damn, because you can't be firing every little thing you hear. I mean, I try really hard not to have a batting average. I want to be batting 1,000. That's not to say I've never made a mistake. Of course, I have, but I really try to be a little maybe more conservative than some others. I think. I've thought a lot about this, but it's funny we're talking at the end of the summer, because the summer is the only time really when the season slows down enough, or the news flow slows down enough where you can think about things. Like so often, once it gets to mid-October, it's just like all of a sudden it's June. I mean, it's just you're on the hamster wheel and you don't really have a lot of time to reflect. But I'm like, should I do things differently, this or that? I think ultimately you just have to do what you think is comfortable. And so often I know something's about to happen, but I don't have maybe that last final thumbs up from someone involved, and then you see it go out there first. And that as much as I say it doesn't matter, it matters in those moments. You're like, damn it, I let that one go.
I remember last year when I was texting you before the Johnny Gaudreau thing, it was like probably an hour and a half, 2 hours before it actually happened. And I'm like, where do you think he's going? You're like, you just kept sending me the Columbus cannon going off.
I know.
And I was like, and I could tell like you probably like you knew, but it's kind of like what you were saying. Like maybe you didn't have like everything where you're like fully comfortable firing it out there. I don't even remember who broke it, but you know what I'm saying? It's just, I just remember that.
But here's the thing is, we know, or that that's what's in the works, but especially something like that, like maybe when they get down and the contract doesn't work, or someone comes in last minute, I mean, you're trying to report on that's where the balance is, right? Because I do think also, like when I have my podcast, or certainly when we get close to the deadline, we're trying to both tell you what's going to happen, where things are headed, what direction they're going in. But then, of course, we're trying to finalize the story and say, okay, he signed in Columbus, and this was the terms, and this is why he went there, and all that sort of stuff. And that was a surprise that day, if you remember. I mean, we got to that free agency day, and I don't think a lot of people would have thought that morning he was going to sign in Columbus. There's always talk about Philadelphia or New Jersey or other places closer to where he grew up. And I don't think I nailed that down first, but certainly it was in the air before it was on TV or on my Twitter feed.
Does it like offend? Like, cause you always joke with me too, because like I like jokingly did like the Kevin Hayes one like to the Blues, and because one of my buddies like golfs with him, and then you always will tease me like insider with the R's, like it's the ongoing joke, right? Because you have those like random Twitter accounts. I think there's like the hockey insider with the R's. There's like the NHL rumor daily guy. Like they all have all these sources, but does that does that ever offend you guys, like the big dogs, like you guys? Because it's like you went to like school for this, and obviously, like you said, you never like I'm gonna be an insider, but you went to school for everything, you like paid your dues almost. Does it ever like annoy you, like when these random people try to like, I don't know, like slight you, or they try to come out, you know what I'm saying, kind of like on Twitter, like you just see these like, I don't know, Twitter's such like a mob cesspool, so it's you know what I mean? I just always wonder if that like annoys you, I guess, because it's, you know what I mean?
No, it doesn't. Honestly, I think it's cool. Like, because as I was saying to the first question from Cam there, like I can't tell someone who's much younger, I can't really tell you how to become this job, because I do think it's moving so quickly. And so it would make sense to me that someone younger is going to come at it in a totally different way. And so I respect everyone to that degree. The only thing I'll tell you that annoys me, and it happened, I wish I could remember the story, but someone was tweeting like Chris Johnston is reporting this guy's going somewhere, or like just something I never said, and that
it caught traction.
It got huge traction, and I did something I never do.
You applied.
I called them out.
You can't.
I retweeted and just said like this is a fabrication or something like that, and that unfortunately like that's a double-edged sword, because that gave it a lot more traction.
Oh yeah.
Like everyone's like, oh, what is this? But like on whatever day, whatever that was, I remember I was going to a friend's party, like a birthday party, and I probably was stressed. I don't know what was going on, but I just like I was like my breaking point. I'm like, look, I got a hard enough time with dealing with certain people in the league. And like if you're just making shit up that I didn't even say, and then they're gonna read that and they might text me and be like, what is this? And sometimes like that's the crazy thing about the world we live in. I think they might have said I said it on my podcast. It's like I recognize like not a lot of people listen to the podcast, right? Like they might just say, Fried said this on 32 Thoughts. They don't listen to 32 Thoughts. They just trust that it's true. And anyway, I don't know what that person was trying to do. Anyway, I shouldn't have had a thin skin about that, but I did. That's one that's like recently in my mind. I think that was in like June or something. Yeah. That's the only thing. Like if you just make up that I said something, that pisses me off. But if you're trying to take my dinner, like if you want to compete, like, I mean, I think that's great. And I would, I encourage anyone to get into it. I mean, this beats working for a living. I will not deny that. It's like any job, it's not going to be good every day. And sometimes you think you're crappy at it. And sometimes you're probably riding a little too high, but it's so much fun. And somehow I'm, here kind of in the middle of my working life. And I haven't had a job since high school, man. That's the last time I had a real job. And so that's, I think other people should do it. I want to be optimistic, even in this sort of strange media universe we occupy. So I would encourage anyone to get out there and try to beat us on your scoops.
Well, you're smart. You started a podcast like everyone else.
That's it. The last question I had about your role now is because a lot of people I don't think realize this. When you mentioned it in the summertime is like the only time where things just kind of calm down for you. But trade deadline day, fun for fans. Do you enjoy that, or do all the insiders like, oh my goodness, because it's like not sleeping, or is that just how it is from the start of the year up till basically I guess it probably slows down after the deadline. I don't know. What's that like?
So the deadline day itself is great.
It is good.
Fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and we come to the studio, right, and everybody's in, and they got like these box lunches, and like I don't know, it sounds weird, but it's so unique. Like it's not like. It's a day unlike all the other days of our jobs. And you also wake up that morning and you're like, hey, at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock tonight when the deadline's passed, we do our post hits. Like this is over now for another year.
Yeah.
It's the hard time, honestly, is like the 7 weeks or whatever leading up to the deadline where you're continually talking about the same group of players that are likely going to be traded. And you got to kind of react to a lot of the other rumors. Like it gets a little bit like that's where it can be difficult, I find, because it can be hard to advance those stories, right? I mean, by the time we get to January 1st, we have a good idea of which teams are probably not going to be in the mix for the playoffs, and so they're going to be looking to get rid of this player or that player. Like we as we go along, we get pretty good at basically giving you the 50-odd players that are in the pool of those that could be moved, and but then we're just talking about the same people again and again. I can only imagine what it's like for those players and their families. I mean, I don't mean to say that. Feel bad for me in that process because for them there's some real world consequences for them, but I find that period sometimes the weeks, like several weeks out from before the trades start, can be hard. This year was awesome though. Like this year we had so many big moves for like 2 or 3 weeks leading into the deadline. So like this past season rather, that will be the one I'll say. February 2023 was lit, and I'm not complaining about those weeks leading into the deadline because we had actual movement, but some years it's just a lot of talk. And then all the trades happen in the last 3 days, and that can be a bit tenuous. But the day itself, honestly, it's sort of like Christmas. It's weird. It's hard to explain. It's just like this day you don't normally get. And then I do know the next morning, like, okay, things are quiet now for a little while. Last year I went away for a few days almost immediately after trade deadline, which isn't something obviously I typically do during the season. But like that's the one window if you're going to put your feet up, that's the time to do it.
Do you so you mentioned that you go into the studio, so is it like, because I think that myself and a lot of people like that are fans would think that you guys are always competing, but so is the deadline kind of something like where everyone in the studio, anyone that works for TSN, Sportsnet, all the other studios, do you just go in and like everyone's kind of working together? Is that kind of like the vibe or the feel when it comes to trade deadline?
For sure, but I'll say this, like we basically have an insider desk at TSN where I've been working now. And so really it's like me, Pierre LeBrun, Darren Dreger, and then Bob McKenzie always comes out of retirement.
Man, I love him.
And then tells us, he sits with us and tells us, like, I'm not talking to anyone anymore. I'm the outsider now. Like, he likes playing that up. He always still gets a story or two, of course, but he doesn't, but so we're specifically focused on the news. And then, we have our main panel Over the years, it's been like Ray Ferraro and Mike Johnson or James Duthie. I mean,
Love
and they
Duthie.
kind of have to keep the day moving because it's not trades all the time, right? And so I would say it's more our sort of small group of insider panel or whatever they label us that we're really focused on what's happening. Of course, other people in the studio, might have some ins with certain teams and be giving us, little tips to start chasing around. But it's really kind of our group that we go beast mode that way. And, it's funny. I worked at Sportsnet prior to TSN, and what we actually did at Sportsnet is they would put us all in a hotel downtown, basically beside the studio. So it's almost like a 2-day thing. Like we'd get together like the night before, sometimes talk about elements of the show. Like sometimes it's almost like an official meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it was more unofficial. We just have dinner together and we're sharing info. And we all sleep in this hotel for like 3 hours. And then like literally you're at the studio at 5 a.m. getting makeup on or whatever. I don't know if they still do that because they moved studios. But that was kind of unique too. It made it almost more intense. But yeah, everyone's kind of pulling on the same rope. And as I say, like there's like an energy in the air because when I go in on say a Tuesday in November, we're doing insider trading. Like you might have 4 or 5 people at most, sort of not on camera, and then we got the 3 or 4 panelists or whatever. Like it's pretty quiet. You go in that day, there's like 50 people in this room. Like it's just like there's an energy and a buzz and. As I say, the best part about it is when you wake up on deadline day, it's going to be over before you go to bed.
I love that. All right, let's do some rapid fire. All right, don't have to go in deep. We're gonna ask you just some storylines. Me and Stewie will switch back and forth. I live in Southern Ontario. I have my dad, and I grew up a Leafs fan. I'm a Sharks fan now, but like the Leafs, I understand how big they are, and obviously Austin Matthews, getting his extension was massive, and now it kind of turns to Nylander. I'm curious. Way too early prediction. Mitch Marner's number.
Ooh, way too early.
Way too early. What do you think it's going to be?
12 million.
Okay. How many years?
I don't know where he's signing. That's the problem. I mean, and I'm not saying it's not Toronto.
Yeah.
But let's assume it's Toronto. I don't know. Maybe he does 12 and a half times 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is he the one that gets the 8? Is he the one that gets the 8? Okay.
Well, I mean, he's from here. Why not?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Way too early, though. I got to say.
Way too early. Yeah, way too early.
Like, that's not information. That is a blind guess on the start of September.
Obviously, one of the big questions going into the season, you're going to probably have to talk about like what you're talking about. Oh, we're going to have to talk about the same guy over and over again. Patrick Kane. What are some of the teams that you think that he might end up going to? I mean, obviously, I saw that one report out the other day about Detroit possibly because of DeBrincat and all that stuff. But do you think he is going to go for the cup again, or do you think he's just looking for maybe Buffalo. The best spot, like on a 1-year deal? Yeah, Buffalo would be cool. Obviously, he's from there. I don't know, but
I think he's open. Like, I don't think he's of a mind. It has to be a 1-year deal. It has to be a team that can win next season. Like, I think he's curious to see what the teams come forward with, right? And so maybe there's a world where it's a team that we won't view as an immediate cup contender this season, but maybe they're going to give him a 3-year contract or something that is appealing to him, and it's a city you'd like to live in. I mean, I think that would make some sense. But similarly, the flip side of that coin is, okay, maybe it's a team that is one piece away from a Stanley Cup, and he believes in them. And so I think what's been interesting about how he handled this whole negotiation is right from the beginning, after he got the hip procedure done in June, he was like, I'm not signing July 1st. He wanted to see how the summer played out. He wanted to see where the teams were at, and he wanted to leave his doors and options open. And so I don't get the sense today that he's decided it has to be any one place or any one thing. I think that, the beauty when you're in his position, obviously, his stats speak for themselves. His 3 cups speak for themselves. The $100+ million that he's earned as an NHL, like he's the rare player. I mean, what does he need, right? It can be. I think he can do a lot of different things. But nothing will beat another cup, right? And so I think ultimately, I'd be surprised if he signed somewhere that we're not looking at as a team that could win a cup during the length of that contract. I think ultimately, he was a lot of years out of the playoffs in Chicago before the trade to the Rangers last year at the deadline, and so I think that it's going to be a team that's on the cusp of taking that step at least in the next year, 2 or 3.
Yeah, it never looked like he fit in Rangers. I don't know why. They seem like they tried to force everything when they were playing with him and Panarin. Like it never clicked. Like Tarasenko there and
too much of the same thing, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hockey's the one where chemistry is so important, where it's very difficult to do a lot of turnover mid-season.
Yeah,
And he was playing on a bum hip,
Oh,
right? I
that
mean,
too.
at the end of the day,
yeah,
he wasn't healthy, and I think that's what's interesting about now too is that all of what I've heard and seen, since he got that procedure done, is that A, he's ahead of schedule, and B, that this is going to work for him. Let's hope. Hip surgeries are very tough on any athlete, but especially a hockey player with the movement required. So let's hope we get back to seeing him have a little bit of showtime in the later stage of his career here.
All right, as a Sharks fan, it's gonna be rough for a while. I got to go through 20 years of them, kind of dominating the Western Conference. No cup, obviously. How many years before you think they get back in the playoffs?
Ooh.
I'm ready for pain.
I'm setting the over under at 3.5, and I'm taking the over.
I kind of hope for 3, but I feel the same.
So I was thinking like 4 to 5 is somewhere in the range. I mean, the trouble there, and it's obviously not Mike Greer's fault or any of the new front office. I mean, and I understand why Doug Wilson did what he did, but they just signed so many players long term. They're still kind of pulling it apart, right? I mean, it wasn't one of those simpler rebuilds where you just trade the veteran players. In this case, all the veteran players came with just massive cap numbers and long terms on their deals. And that's, those are all earned contracts, right? Those guys delivered a lot of success for the Sharks and really, probably one of the hardest luck organizations I think in my time covering the league, because if we had gone back 15 years, I would have said for sure that group's winning a cup. And they got close. They got to the one final. Obviously, we're in the Western Conference Finals a whole bunch too. Didn't quite get the job done, but I get why they gave out the contracts, but it's so hard in a cap world to rebuild when you have those players.
The follow up to that is one, were you surprised that they were able to move Karlsson at only 1.5 million retained? And secondly, do you think that he is enough to get the Penguins back in the playoffs?
I think he's enough to get them back in the playoffs. I'm not totally convinced that he's enough to really make them put them in contender status again. And that's obviously what they're aiming for. I still like the move, though. I mean, if you're the Penguins, I'm not sure what you could do, right? I mean, I don't know that they could have made any series of moves that are realistic that I would think, okay, they're now a top-tier team again, just because of the age of their main players and some of the other things that are going on and just how hard it is to make trades. And, yeah, I was stunned that San Jose was able to move Karlsson and only retain that little money. I think that they absolutely could have got a better return had they been willing to eat more money. But that's really easy for me to say from my living room and not having to be the GM that calls up the owner and says, hey, well, are you going to pay an extra $10 million so we get more draft picks here? I mean, I could understand, or 20 million or whatever, the total number might have been. So yeah, I was surprised by that. I think it hurt the return. In a weird way, I almost wanted to see them be willing to eat half, because I think you would have had a legit bidding war, especially if they had done that during the season last year. I think you could have really created an interesting market if you were willing to trade him somewhere, $6-7 million. But I mean, I also get there's a financial reality here, and I think all things considered, it kind of works out well for everyone involved. It was a really creative trade with all the money that got shipped around, and the Sharks got some more players I think they can flip again before this deadline or the next one.
Yeah. This one, I love Olympic hockey. So when do you think we see the next best on best? Like, I know a lot of the rumors about the World Cup have been swirling around, but is that the next thing you think, or do you think they do it the next Olympics?
This one hurts me.
I know,
because
I hate it.
I love international hockey. I didn't
Best
have any
hockey.
gray. Didn't have any gray in this beard the last time that they played best on best, and I was at the tournaments in Sochi in 2014 and the World Cup in Toronto in 2016. I think they have no choice. So honestly, I mean, it's such a big issue for the players, as it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at such a great time in the game. Honestly, it's so cool to see how many interesting players, different kind of skill sets have come into the league in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and those guys want to play for their national teams. And so I think that it's clear it's a huge issue for Marty Walsh, who's just taken over the NHLPA here in recent months. I think the NHL has heard that. There was a chance they were going to go to Beijing in 2022, and that got wiped out. But I think there'll be a 2026 in Italy. I'd be surprised if they didn't do that. And of course, they're going to have to resuscitate and actually build a tournament that is their own, that isn't at the Olympics. It'd be great if it's every 2 years. I think the beauty about that is you get continuity, right? I mean, 1 year a team will disappoint or a surprise or whatever, and then 2 years later they got to try to follow that up in some way, either with a better performance or what have you. We could all sit here and like fill endless hours debating the picks. Who
it's gonna be a great time for you guys.
It's fantastic. I mean, I don't see a negative to it. I mean, I understand some of the owners don't like their season being shut down. They think it disrupts their business, but I think it builds the sport globally, right? And at the end of the day, hockey won't continue to be the great sport that it is today if we don't have people all around the world choosing to play it as kids, right? I mean, who would have thought Austin Matthews, someone like him, would exist, right? Certainly 30 years ago, this idea of a kid that grew up in the desert who didn't have any direct tie to hockey, but just decided, put on skates and play the game and fell in love with it. And now you get one of the better players in the league. I mean, I think that's what we want. We're competing for the best athletes at a young age. And so I think that the sport, I get that an individual NHL owner in a city might not see the big picture, but for those of us commenting on it and looking at it, I mean, to not be in the Olympics, I think is criminal. And so I'd be surprised if they missed another Winter Olympics. I don't know what's going to happen 10 or 20 years from now, but I think that there's too much pressure not for them to be in 2026 in Italy.
Yeah, the TJ Oshie stuff, that was like phenomenon here. And I know in America, because hockey's like king up there, but bars here, my buddies that didn't even watch hockey, they were just glued to the TV because it was a St. Louis guy and he's scoring goal after goal and you were there for it. So it was unbelievable. And without that, TJ Oshie was like a household name for a whole month in America. And without the Olympics, that never would have happened. And that's what bugs me so much about. And I get, like you said, the injuries and stuff. It's just so frustrating because
I think that when it comes to international, like compared to all the sports that like professional sports in North America specifically that go to the Olympics, like basketball, it's just very one-sided. Like I think it's very interesting, but the U.S. it's just such an advantage over others, and Canada and the U.S. are very close. But I think like the thing that is so good for hockey is that like regardless if you're a hockey fan, like every team is kind of close and has a chance to win gold. And when teams go on runs, it just makes like Dominik Hasek and Yager and everything like that. Like it just made so many huge storylines, and then it just comes back, and then you're into the NHL again. It's so much different. Like soccer is huge as well, but like you have the World Cup, and it's the one sport I think team sport wise that's on the grand stage where I think it's necessary for the Olympics. Like it's so much different than all the other ones, and I agree. I really hope it comes back.
Let's put it this way: Sidney Crosby been one of the top NHL players and at the top for so many years. What is going to probably be remembered most from his career? And I'm a Canadian, so maybe I'm viewing this through Canadian glasses. But I think the golden goal, when all is said and done, will be the singular most memorable moment that he produced in his career. And
on Canada, it was just that's definitely going to be like I think his biggest.
And he won 3 Stanley Cups, right? He's won absolutely every individual award and had monster seasons and all this and that, but you can't create magic like that without an international stage. And look, it's been a long time since the U.S. men have had that kind of success in a best on best, but look at this generation that's there for them. And I'm not, just as a prediction, but there could be a chance for an Austin Matthews or a, Matthew Tkachuk or someone to deliver a similar moment that gives them something that will be remembered so far beyond their careers if they went and won the U.S. a gold medal at the Olympics. And so, I mean, come on, this league is mostly based in the U.S. There's 25 teams there, and I think anything we can do to further grow the game, it's been great already. But I just, come on, it's time. This is personal for me, though. I really, 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 really miss those tournaments.
I hate that Team North America. It made us look so bad.
The Team North America.
All of our studs were on North America. Eichel, Gaudreau. Like,
I tweeted out Team USA that I think I remember it was Bleacher Report. I think they did a what would a 2025 Team USA look like, and I tweeted out like, is this not better than what Team Canada was sent, or like the best that US could have ever sent? Like it was. Their roster now is wild, and I agree. I hope they bring it back. It's just it's such a good tournament.
Who's playing goal for Canada if we have best on best tomorrow?
Well, Benner was gonna be it before everything went to hit the fan
like
here.
Carter Hart. I mean, it's like
if Armstrong's the manager and Benner has a good year in the next few years, I bet you he picks Benner.
It's like, I mean, that's why I think U.S. has such a, like, their defense and their, obviously
we got Hellebuck,
and, yeah, like, it's...
Are we going to have Stewie as the emergency goalie?
That's it.
Hey, wait, real quick, you brought up Matthews with Arizona, and obviously he's a Coyotes fan growing up. Where do you think that goes? And I love, my brother went to college out in Arizona, played out there. not for Arizona State, but he played out there, and it's just such a cool. It's a huge city. The rink's in a terrible spot. You've been there, I'm sure, plenty of times in Glendale, like where it was.
Yeah.
It's just like so frustrating because I see what happens in Vegas. In Vegas, I know it's like a unicorn. It's Vegas,
nuts,
but
man,
it's such the players love living there. I know Clayton Keller from being here, and he loves it there. Like they got to figure it out. I mean, I can't see them. I know the commissioner will do everything he's possible to like fix it, but it's like what's going on there? You think what you know what I mean? Like what the arena?
Like will they stay?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's no secret the league wants them to stay for all the reasons you're mentioning.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense from how big the market is to the weather, the climate. Just like we've seen so many places that it has everything but the arena, right? If you have the facility in the right place, it's a slam dunk. You know, you're going to get free agents there. You're going to get all kinds of guys exactly that want to be there. I think it'll be a favorite place to go on a road trip if you're a fan of a team. You're like, hey, we're going to watch the guys play this year. I mean, just go out there for a few days and hang out in Scottsdale and go to a game. I mean, that you could do worse than that in the league. So. But I do at the same time think that this is the kind of final countdown, which is hard to say, right? Because they've been through so many versions of this. But, you know, the Coyotes, you know, at a certain point, even their owner, Alex Morello, like he doesn't want to do business in the way he's doing it right now. I mean, he's trying to get an arena built and working with the various towns and townships and areas where he's looking at building teams. So I think it's got to happen sooner or later, that being that they have a formal arena deal, that there's a plan to get shovels in the ground, and that they're not playing at Mullet Arena for too long. I mean, I think it's fine for the time being. I'm of the opinion, I don't see why – I get why people sort of scoff at it because we don't see it in the other leagues all the time. But, you know, I remember when the Expos used to play series in Puerto Rico. I mean, there's lots of examples of teams, you know, even if anyone went to – and I hope I'm not offending anyone, but like Islanders games at Nassau Coliseum, I mean, that was a different experience than most of the rest of the league. It was a small building, not a lot of amenities, this and that. I mean, I think that this is a fine short-term solution if you get the long-term solution, but I think they got to get it this year. I think it has to be locked in, and you know, I hope they keep the team there. Honestly, I've always loved going for games, and I'm not one of the Canadian media that are always kicking the Coyotes every time there's bad news about their financial situation.
You think they expand to 34 eventually with Salt Lake and maybe Atlanta, Houston, like one of those three or two of those three? I mean,
I don't know what the cities will be, but they'll expand. Yeah. I mean, there's. Look at it, though. Seattle has been a home run from a business standpoint, and they had a great run last year in the playoffs. Their farm team went to Game 7 of the Calder Cup Final, too. So, I mean, they're set up, I would think, to keep being a great team. And then Vegas has been a screaming home run from every measure. And wins a Stanley Cup. They had to wait six long years for that.
As a Sharks fan, bro. As a Sharks fan, it's brutal, man.
Every sports league should be in Vegas. It's
I think they will be.
With baseball, it's like you go out there for a 3-game stretch. I go watch the Cardinals for 3 days. You know, if I really wanted to, it's just. But no, I agree with you.
Yeah, you have to go to St. Louis in the summer so you can cool down in Vegas.
That is true.
We'll get you out of here in the last one. All right, this last one. So this offseason was dominated by Connor Bedard and the hype for him. Give me his scoring output in season 1 with the Blackhawks.
See, I don't want to be part of the hype train.
That's fine. Do you have another? Do you have a potential other winner for the Calder? Because I kind of think it might be somebody else.
Well, there could be other winners, but it will not surprise me if he scores a point a game. Bedard.
Okay, I feel like that's a lot. Like I feel like I've seen a lot of things where it's like he scores 30 and maybe like 65 because the team around him isn't as, you know.
If you pin me down, I'd probably say 70 games, just because you know you can't necessarily count on anyone playing 82.
Yep.
But it will not surprise me if he ends up at roughly a point a game right out of the gate. And I almost feel like I'm underselling him a bit. It's so hard to know, but look at his numbers in junior. Like it's absolutely ridiculous.
Big
the numbers
OHL
he
guy,
put up.
It's wild.
He goes back to. But here's the thing: he goes back to like when he was 15. He first entered the league, and it was a weird time because he entered during the COVID bubble, and it wasn't the same league it is. But still, like from the minute he was in that league, he produced goals and points like crazy. He goes to the World Juniors, produces goals and points like crazy. I mean, at a certain point, it's like. I don't know why we would expect anything different. I mean, I know the team isn't going to be great, but the flip side of that is, you know, he's going to get tons of minutes. He's going to be on their top power play. Yeah. You know, if he somehow got drafted to a really competitive team, he might have to earn those things, you know, the way coaches like to do. I just think that I'd be surprised if he had less than 70 points. That's So that's where I'll put it. But if he gets like 90, I'll be like, man, I should have just said 90 because that's kind of what I'm thinking.
All right, last one, and then you got a big fantasy draft tonight.
You do.
Since obviously we got like an NHL gaming kind of podcast, NHL centric, with Cam being the voice of the NHL Gaming World Championships. Gotta ask, any background growing up, and maybe you somehow still play any video games? Did you ever play any video games, any of the hockey video games or anything?
I think you had to play hockey.
Yeah, but you will never even heard of this game.
Really?
But my very first ever video game was Blades of Steel on the original.
I've heard of it.
I have it.
Heard of it.
It might be my background.
Oh, Steel! Like it had like this old school like intro music.
Dude, you played going left and right. Like it was, it was nuts, man. That's a awesome. Classic. That's a classic.
I got into the early NHL games, like I remember 94, 95.
Yep.
But honestly, was never a gamer sort of as an adult.
Yeah.
So, I know it's huge, but
it's crazy.
It's
I don't know where you guys all find the time. That's the only thing I'm thinking.
I do it. He just had a kid, so now I have 2 kids, and I'm like, you're just gonna have to lose sleep. You got to do it at nighttime when they gotta sleep. It's like I tell him it's like my hobby, and with the internet nowadays, it's so hard to keep in touch with all my old teammates, and it's so easy now. You can just sit there and play whatever. I mean, during COVID, you saw it. It was huge. Like it was, the one way to do anything. You know what I mean? It was nuts. But yeah.
Maybe I should start though. Maybe I should start again because I know I would like it.
Yeah.
You could come. You could come play some 3v3 with us.
Yeah, you can play with us. You can play 3-on-3.
I would be so bad though. I'd be like, hey, it's not left and right anymore.
You'd be like, Chris, go back door. I'll feed you.
All right, man. Well, we want to thank you for taking the time to come on and talk, especially about your career. We always find that stuff so interesting. So for everyone, you already are following him, but on X at Reporter Chris, make sure you are if you are not. And thanks again for hopping on with us, Chris.
That was fun, guys. Look forward to the season.
Absolutely.